saw a man looking at me out at Cracker Barrel, and every time I glanced over, he's looking at me, and so I nodded at him. He nodded back, and my wife sitting there, she's like, "Who's that?" I said, "I don't know." I said, there's a lot of people in this community. They know me. I don't always know them. I don't always recognize them. And every time I looked up from my plate and glanced over, he was looking at me and smiled. And so when we finished our meal, I said, obviously he knows me, so I'll go over, I'll touch base, see if I can figure out who this is. And I went over there and hey, how you doing? Good. How's the family? Oh, they're good. I said, good. I said, how's work going? He goes, "Oh, work's busy." I said, "Oh, man, I bet it is. I'm fishing, just trying to get some information on who this is." And finally, I just had to humble myself. I said, "You know what? I am so sorry. I do not know your name." And he goes, "Yeah, I don't know who you are either." I tell you that story because it's such a weird swing in, but chances are good if you would have known Jesus really well, on this day, there's a good chance you may not have recognized him. Jesus is going to be beat like none other. He's going to be flogged and have skin ripped off his back. He will be covered in blood from the top of his neck to the calves. He's going to be punched and hit with a blindfold on. Usually when you're in a fight and someone starts throwing a fist at you, it gives you a little bit of a chance to react, to brace yourself, to even start to pull back from that hit. But when you're blindfolded and you can't see the punch coming, you take it full force. And this is what's going to be happening to Jesus today. He's going to suffer. We live in a world of suffering. Many of us have been through terrible times of suffering. Some of us are in the middle of a time of suffering. We can see suffering around us. And Jesus too will have to suffer. Now why? If God is a loving God, then why did he allow his son to suffer? Well, 700 years before Jesus, the prophet Isaiah gave us a little insight as to why that would happen. Because God is a just God, and when we do wrong, justice requires that there be a punishment. He laid all that punishment on Jesus. Isaiah 53 says, he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. A punishment meant for us was laid on him, and by his wounds we are healed. All the sin of the world was laid on Jesus, and he paid the ultimate punishment. Now all any of us have to do is connect our lives to him, and we go free. God, for some reason, though, went into a lot of details in regards to the suffering of Jesus. We're so quick to want to run to Easter. Aren't you? Man, Easter, let's just get to the resurrection, because the hope and the excitement and the joy of let's just hurry up and get there. But God doesn't allow us to do that. God makes us walk through the pain of the cross. And today will be Jesus' last moment in front of Pilate before Pilate turns him over. And so if you have your Bibles, open up to John chapter 19, and I'm going to begin reading with verse 1. Pilate gave orders for Jesus to be beaten with a whip. The soldiers made a crown of thorns out of branches, and they put it on Jesus, and then they put a purple robe on him. They came up to him and they said, "Hey, you, King of the Jews." They also hit him with their fist. All right, so the Roman soldiers are making sport right now out of Jesus. They didn't have to go this far, by the way. They were told to flog him and crucify him. Everything beyond that is just making sport of him. They'll spit on him, they'll slap him, they'll punch him, they'll club him. All of that too was prophesied. Why am I going to show you several of the prophecies today? Because they are signposts for us. This is who the Messiah of God will be. You look for these signposts along the way. And Isaiah, again, 700 years before Jesus, gave us another signpost. It says in chapter 50, "I offered my back to those who beat me, my cheeks to those who pulled out my beard. I did not hide my face from the mocking and the spitting. That is a prophecy regarding the coming Messiah and how he'll be treated. So when it happens to Jesus, it alerts us. Who is this guy really? It's a signpost so you'll know who you're looking at. Verse 4, Pilate went out. This time he said, I will have Jesus brought out to you again. Then you can see for yourselves that I have not found him guilty. Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe, and Pilate said, behold the man. All right, that's a famous saying, behold the man. This is Pilate's attempt to try to appeal to the crowd's compassion. Jesus steps out there. He's covered in blood. He's bruised. He's swollen. Again, I doubt you would have recognized him in this moment if you would have seen him. And Pilate is, behold, he's just a man, you guys. He's not a threat to you. Pilate will try 4 times to get Jesus off on this. But the crowd is really revved up around him at this time. The soldiers, they've hit him so much he's disfigured now. Here's another signpost for you real quick. Isaiah 52. Just as there were many who were appalled at him, his appearance was so disfigured beyond that of any human being, and his form marred beyond human likeness. Oh, come on, you're smart people. How could they know that would happen to Jesus hundreds of years before it happened? This isn't blind faith that you guys have. I know that people will tell you, well, religion is just blind faith. Not for us, it's not. There's enough signposts along the way that our faith is solid. We stand on solid ground in our faith. The story goes on, verse 6. When the chief priests and the temple police saw Jesus, they yelled, crucify him, crucify him. Pilate told them, you take him and nail him to the cross. I did not find him guilty of anything. The crowd replied, he claimed to be the Son of God. Our Jewish law says that he must be put to death. And when Pilate heard this, he was terrified. He went back inside. He asked Jesus, where are you from? But Jesus did not answer. Okay, why is Pilate terrified? Pilate has a Roman worldview. It's full of suspicion. He would have been raised and understood Greek mythology, and that Greek mythology taught that sometimes the gods enter into humans, and they just told him he claimed to be the Son of God. He claimed to be a God himself, and so Pilate now, everything in him is starting to ring a bell of, why am I even messing with this guy? And then his own wife comes up to him. It's not in John, but it's in the other Gospels. Had a terrible dream about Jesus. And she begs her husband, don't have anything to do with this righteous man. So all of that is going on in Pilate's mind right now. Is he terrified of Jesus? Oh, I believe the wording is accurate. He is absolutely terrified of Jesus. And standing before Pilate, Jesus does not answer. Another signpost. Isaiah 53, and he was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. Like a lamb led to slaughter, and like sheep silent before her shearers, he did not open his mouth. God is just over and over and over again trying to tell you who Jesus is in this. Verse 10, why won't you answer my question, Pilate asked. Don't you know that I have authority to let you go free or to nail you to a cross? Oh my goodness. The irrational question, don't you know I have authority? Of Jesus, you're asking Jesus that? Jesus who had authority to forgive sins, Jesus who had authority to heal people, Jesus who had authority over demons, Jesus who had authority over death and raised people back to life. You think you have authority over him? It's just meant to drip of irrational thought for you and I. When you see Jesus and Pilate together, verse 11, Jesus replied, if God had not given you that authority, that power, you couldn't do anything at all to me. But the one who handed me over to you did something even worse. Then Pilate, wanting to set Jesus free, do you see this? Set him free. But the crowd again yelled, if you set this man free, you are no friend of the emperor. Anyone who claims to be a king is an enemy of the emperor. All right, so Pilate made a few mistakes the first time he moved into Jerusalem. He came in with some graven images around him. The Jews rebelled against that. They went and they told Rome. And then there's this time when he tries to use some of the money from the temple treasury, and again, the Jews rebelled. And over again, the Jews have gone to Rome and they have complained about Pilate. So Pilate feels like he's a little bit on thin ice here with Rome. And this threat that we'll tell the emperor on you is something that they've already done. These accusations are going to start hitting home inside Pilate. Verse 13, when Pilate heard this, he brought Jesus out. Then he sat down on the judge's bench at the place known as the stone pavement. In Aramaic, this pavement is called Gabbatha, or Gabbatha. Is it Gabbatha, Brian? He's over there. It was about noon on that day before Passover, and Pilate said to the crowd, "Look at your king." "Crucify him. Crucify him," they yelled. "So you want me to crucify your king?" Pilate asked. And the chief priest replied, "The emperor is our king." Then Pilate handed Jesus over to be nailed on a cross. Jesus was accused of blasphemy. These chief priests are committing blasphemy right now. They're declaring the emperor their king, small k, and they're rejecting Jesus as king, capital K. This all brings us back then to how this whole passage began. Right there in the second verse of this passage, there's a crown, and that crown is laid on Jesus' head. Anytime you have a king, there's usually a crown. Most crowns are adorned with gold. Most crowns are adorned with rubies and jewels. Only one man ever wore a crown of thorns, one. And it's Jesus in this moment. And he's being mocked as king, and he's being rejected by some as king. And Pilate is, here's your king. Next week you'll see where Pilate writes the charges against Jesus, King of the Jews. And boy, the Jewish people will rebel against that. No, write down that he claimed to be King of the Jews. Pilate will turn on them. What I've written, I've written. He's all done bowing to this crowd. Why is the crown of thorns important? Well, crowns are symbolic of kingship. I understand that. But, okay, just some real quick background. Thorns through Scripture are usually symbolic of the consequence of sin. We go all the way back to Genesis chapter 3. Adam and Eve in the garden. Adam and Eve sin. They're kicked out of the garden. There's a curse given on Adam. There's a curse given on Eve. From now on, you'll have pain in childbirth, Eve is told. And then God also curses the ground that they're going to have to now work. They had food. They had food everywhere in the garden, but now they don't have the garden anymore. Now they got to work for their food. And God cursed the ground. He cursed the earth. We're part of a fallen earth. That's why there's so much pain around us all the time. And one of the curses on the ground was thorns. Thorns will now grow up. Thorns became symbolic of the consequences of sin. Are you tracking with where this is going? That they placed a crown of thorns on Jesus. Jesus is going to carry to the cross the consequences of sin. It's symbolic. It's in the way of a crown, but it's thorns that he carries. This is really important stuff for you and I, to know that Jesus paid the consequences of our sins. From the beginning of time, he's paid for them. The question is not, is Jesus king? After all, crowns are for kings, but the better question today for you and I is he our king? And if he is truly our king, then we have to do what he commands us to do. Plain and simple, if our king tells us to do something, you have to do it. He's your king. What has he told you to do? Our king said, love. Love others. You have to do that because he's your king and he calls the shots. Our King has said, forgive. Gosh, it's hard to forgive when you've really been seriously injured, isn't it? But I don't call the shots in my life. He calls the shots, so I have to forgive. Our King says, trust me. You know, Jesus, sometimes you can be hard to trust. But what else do I have today? I guess I will trust you. Our King says, fear not. Lord, do you know what's going on in this world right now? Do you know what's going on in this community? Fear not, our King says. And so today we choose to fear not. Not because it's easy. It's not easy. But because our King told us to do that. You see, if Jesus is your King, He calls the shots. There's a great painting, an ancient work of art from, if I'm saying this right, Antonio Ciceri. It sounds very Italian to me, from 1871. It's a very well-known painting. It's titled, Behold the Man, is what it's titled. Jesus looks very clean there, by the way. That he would not have looked like that on that day. That's Pilate leaning over the balcony, petitioning the crowd. He's just a man. He's just a man. Why do you want him dead so bad? Pilate is trying to turn the crowd, but he's unable to do so. There to the right of the painting is a woman who's turned her back on Jesus. That's Pilate's wife. She's just even so nervous she can't even look at him because of that dream she had. Don't have anything to do with him. She's turned her back. And then there's the crowd. Everyone else on the balcony, correct me if I'm wrong, but almost everyone else on the balcony, they're looking to the crowd to direct how they're going to feel about Jesus. They've not made up their own minds. They're looking to see what the crowd says about him. They'll go that direction. And that's an option for you and I today. What bothers me most in this painting, and I really looked at it long this week, is there to the left is an empty throne, and that bothers me. Because thrones are made for kings. Pilate thinks that's his seat, by the way. It's not. Jesus belongs on that throne, but he doesn't force himself onto it. Writers in the past have said it over and over again. Inside your heart is a throne. Who sits on the middle of the throne in your heart? Who sits there? Do you try to sit there too much? That you try to be your own king? I'll determine what I get in life. I'll determine what I want. I'll determine what I do. Or have you yielded yourself over and invited Jesus in and said, you know what, Lord, the throne of my heart is yours. I'm giving it to you. And you call the shots. You got a couple choices today. You can reject Jesus. That's an option, by the way. For a lot of people, they've heard the story of God becoming a carpenter and then dying for us, and they say, that's just too bizarre for me to follow. I'm out, and they bailed out on that. That's an option today. Or you can follow the crowds and say, you know what? Whatever the crowd's worldview is going to be my worldview. That's an option today. Or you can accept Jesus. You can say, Jesus, you know what? I'm going to ask you to be my king. I'm going to listen to your voice. I'm going to journey with you. I don't know what's ahead of my life right now. I don't know what's ahead. But I know who king of my life is. And today I choose to trust him. Who sits on the throne of your heart, really?